history circles right here in Chico and Butte County back in the day when my dad still circulated about and was part of all of that. And again, I believe we may even have one of the 11 books that our presenter today has put out, has had in print. One of these, really a good format, historical format, these Arcadia format series of books that really feature just mostly photographs, historic photographs, but lots of good information accompanying the photographs. And she's got the one out on Durham. I think she's a co-author of that. But again, our presenter today, Rian Farley. But if you look at those middle 4 letters, Rian, that's the way she likes to be called, Rian Farley. And it was interesting to hear that she was born across the ocean in the Netherlands, came here to the United States in about 1961, as I believe she had not even reached 10 years old at that time. And then into Durham, moved to Durham in 1963, where she would graduate from Durham High School and then on to Chico State with a dual major in German and history. And then, of course, in the years since, got married, stayed right there in Durham, became very interested and involved in Butte County and Durham history circles. Again, 11 books in print, continues to be involved in the Durham community. And again, today we're going to hear about Durham and also about VINA. VINA, another thing that she really has taken a real focus on. So, you're on.
I don't stand still well. There's a couple in this room that might know that. Do not out me. And Dave, that was a really sneaky way to let everybody know how old I am. Yes, I'm old. The gray hair works. I went to Best Buy. I needed some electronics. Young man just come right up there and I said, okay, see the hair? No acronyms, don't talk fast. I have money in hand. Just talk to me like I'm your grandmother. I can do that. So it works. I don't stand still, so these ladies already know. They're going to keep their feet back so I don't step on them. This mic doesn't move, does it, Dave?
It comes out.
Does the mic
move? Does the mic move? How much does it move? Not very much. Okay, well, we'll try. Either that or I'll start really yelling loud. And a couple of you might know I can do that too. Oh, it goes around? Oh, geez, Louise. Yeah, yep, up. There.
Let's see if you can pull it.
Yeah, I got it. Okay, one more. You pull. No. Oh, it's got to come my way. Can you pull it out from underneath that corner?
No.
Hey, success. Okay, that worked. See, now I can do this.
Now if I can get up.
Well, don't look at me. I'm probably older than you are, so. See, now look. Isn't that great? I can pace. So Dave said, Rian, we want stories about Durham. Everything revolves around Durham. Just say yes, it does. For my mind, it does. So this is my pointer stick, because the electronic one doesn't work. And see, now I'm way over here. Isn't that cool? I can pace. Hot diggity. All right, we're going to talk about VINA Ranch history from Peter Lassen to present day. And the reason this is important is because there was also a Stanford Ranch in Durham, as there was a Stanford Ranch in VINA. How many of you have ever been to VINA? How many of you ever drank the wine there? We're going to talk about that too. Cool, so here we go. If there are questions, undoubtedly they will be answered in the slide following or the 3 slides after that. And those of you who are historians know, do I need to go closer? So sorry. Thank you. Those of you who are historians know that sometimes you have to go to LA by way of Seattle. So it's a circuitous story. It's warm in here. I'm nervous. Dave said, hey, how are you today? I said, didn't sleep worth the darn. So. You are an intimidating crowd. No, because you know things. See, I can buffalo everybody else, but you know things. So we were talking earlier when Les was being introduced about the Farwell Grant. Mitchell Terrena was a very, very busy governor for the state of California. He gave the Mexican land grant to Peter Lassen at VINA and Sam Neill at Durham. See, Durham. At the same time, Rancho Bosquejo, I'm sorry, I'm not going to read this for you because you can all read yourselves. 22,000 acres, just like Farwell, just like Durham. Must have been the number that worked well for them. I don't know why. It means wooded ranch. Peter Lassen was born in Denmark. He immigrated to the United States. 10 years later, he went to Oregon, and he was in California, including what he planted was, this is where it all comes together, grapes for wine. The best wine at New Clairvaux is Merlot, or if you're into white, the Assisterica, which is a Greek wine. Good stuff. Sam Neill was in Durham. He got the land grant for Rancho Esquan. So if you ever see Esquan Ranch on a pickup anywhere around town, that's still the same property. They just have reappropriated the name. He's buried at Durham Cemetery. Anybody ever been to Durham Cemetery? Hot diggity, more people know, good. It's a place I call home often. The transition of ownership at VINA. Gerke expanded the vineyard and operated a successful wine and brandy business. Stanford, a member of the Big Four Railroad, had uncanny knowledge. I mean, he grabbed up land. Mike Magliari, sitting back there, he's probably going like this because he knows this story as well. Stanford just knew about things for sale and gobbled them up. Got them for, I don't know, pennies on the dollar probably. He created the VINA Ranch with the world's largest vineyard and winery. The vineyards eventually covered 3,500 acres, but the climate being what it is, it didn't grow some of the types of grapes that were true for Spain or Italy or France. The Stanford Ranch manager lived in a large home, which was originally built for the governor and Mrs. Stanford, but they never occupied that home. When they came to the Stanford Ranch in VINA, they lived in their Pullman car, which was on a siding just west of the main tracks. So, the California and Oregon Railroad, anybody ever heard of that? It changes name when it gets to the border. It becomes the Oregon and California. It came through the Central Valley, and right about here, this is a blow up, right about here is Durham, and right about there is VINA. Came through town, through Chico as well, in 1870. It was the 4th of July of 1870 that we had the dedication of the station just on 5th Street, just a little bit west of us here. That spring of 1870, the students at Durham, remember Durham? The students at Durham School were very bothered by the noise because of the laying of the track. So that's spring of 1870 into June. And the reason I know this is because Dave Noble and I talked about the White Schoolhouse. The White Schoolhouse is, if you've ever been up and down the Midway and you take the overpass over the railroad tracks, on the east side there's a McDonald Huller shed is there now, but that was where the White Schoolhouse was. So John Noble calls me and he says, Rian, where was the White Schoolhouse? I said, come on, John, every school was painted white. How do you know White Schoolhouse from another White Schoolhouse? But it was because Mr. White donated the land for the schoolhouse, so it was called the White Schoolhouse. It was 4 years later that the school in downtown Durham was built, and it was still there. And it's still there now. It's where Almendra is today. Anybody ever been to Almendra? Another reason to go to Durham. Okay, so these are the routes going north-south, and that's what became the Union Pacific, and then later the Southern Pacific. Early death in 1859, Neal willed most of his land to Robert Waddell Durham. This is the story of the Durham family. But in 1868, Durham sold 17,000 acres on the southern part of the rancho to George, as in the town of Gridley. They didn't do very well. And in 79, George sold 17 to Pond, Boggs, and Clark, who then sold those acres to Leland Stanford. And the year was 1880. So 70, the railroad comes through. Stanford knows about land available. He buys up that large tract in 1880. This is Durham. So this is a newspaper article, synopsized with bullet points, and I won't read them to you, but you certainly can read them yourself. How much the community, that is the greater Northern California community, valued what Stanford could do. Because he was infusing, yes, there were farmers, but not with that kind of money. He was infusing the northern state with his foresight, knowledge, and funding. The founding of Leland Stanford Junior University. When I first said this to somebody, I didn't know that was a junior college. It's not. He was Leland Stanford Junior. That's what they named the university. Still there, still in use. While traveling, the younger Stanford developed typhoid. He fell ill in Athens, but he died in Italy. When they came home, they only had the one son. When they came home, they said, well, we don't have any kids, but we should do something for the kids of California. So they endowed a university. The university opened its doors in 1891. The governor died in 1893, Mrs. Stanford in 1905. It was through their efforts, through their work, and through their manipulation of the monies that came back from the ranchos, whether it was VINA Stanford Ranch or Durham Stanford Ranch, that built the infrastructure, hired the professors, filled the libraries and classrooms with books and furnishings. Because it was beef on the hoof, it was tallow, it was grain, it was mutton, it was the sheared sheep that was sold all over the place. In VINA, it's a different story than Durham. Durham was smaller. VINA was much more extensive than Durham was. Some of the most innovative, industrious winemakers have cultivated VINA soil. You've heard of VINA loam. It's the best soil you can have. Unless you have a little VINA loam at your place too, don't you? Peter Lassen was the first to recognize, and he established a 1-acre wine grape vineyard. Henry Gerke acquired the land and expanded to 100 acres. And in 1881, remember 1880, he purchased Durham. 1881, he purchased VINA. The land expanded to over 55,000 acres, and he built the Great VINA Ranch. Really cool, old-fashioned photography and art renderings. Very almost imaginative cows, because they probably never looked quite that sturdy. The same way with the blooded stock, and of course the winery. That's one of the photos you can see if you are at the monastery, at the winery. They have that one on one of the walls there. I'm a dairyman's daughter. Cows just interest me. The top photo is the former distillery. It was burned to the ground in the 1890s. The bottom photo is the winery. Those are the casks. We'll talk more about that in a minute. In 1895, they were talking about How many gallons were being produced at VINA? 2 million gallons. They say 2. It shouldn't be much. It shouldn't be very hard to raise the output from 2 million to 2,500,000 gallons, should the occasion demand it. Sweet wine, fortified wine. Ever heard of Boone's Farm, Strawberry Hill? Those of us of a certain age do remember that. Very sweet. Not something that would titillate the palate if you were having a nice steak dinner. The stock department was very good, and then also they had 100 cows or 120 cows, and they made their own butter, which they then shipped down to Sacramento, San Francisco, and sold at various markets. It wasn't fluid milk. There was no refrigeration, so it was a need to have a maintained product that could be shipped. There are 37 men and a dog in this picture. And the only reason I bring that up is because this is the where all the men live together. Sorry, cheat sheets in the bunkhouse. This is only important because remember I told you that they built a large house at VINA for Mr. and Mrs. Stanford, who never lived there. But the workers were all single men. So they came and worked the land, and they lived together in bunkhouse situations. They had Chinese cooks, just like they did at Durham, at the bunkhouse at Durham and a cookhouse. This is one of several images of mapping. This is the California and Oregon, which became the Union Pacific, which is now the Southern Pacific Railroad. The spur line goes west of the railroad. Here's the winery building, and here are the brandy barns. I'm going to ask you to remember winery building and brandy barns because they're going to be consistent in many of the images that are coming your way, because it doesn't really change. Today, any of you, you've been there, so you know where the new church is. The new church is right about here where the word Stanford is. And these 4 houses here were middle management houses. So, you know, the main manager would live in the fancy house, but there were middle management men who were married with children, so didn't live in the bunkhouse situation. So those locations are still there. Changed, but yeah. The winery building consists of 2 acres. The entire building takes up 2 acres of land. The double-walled building approximated the underground hillside type storage that they had in Spain or Italy or France to maintain the temperature of the wine so it could age in casks. So they mimicked that by building this building in this way. So next time you're there and you're in the winery building, lean up against the brick wall and take a look at the side window, and you see how the window's embrasure is like 2 feet back because the interior wall is brick that you're leaning on while you're sipping. But if you were to go outside the building, it's also brick. There's 2 feet in between. That was filled with dirt, which would keep the temperatures at a more consistent level. That's what the winery casks looked like. The floor was sloped from west to east, so that direction. From west to east, so that they could sluice out between the big casks if they needed to clean after they had done some tapping or some spillage, or they'd had to move from the large casks into smaller casks or bottling. She'll see that. Oh, here, window embrasure. The heavy timber trusses. Okay, where's the engineer? Over there. He knows about those kinds of timber trusses for the holding up the weight of the roof. These are still original. So this is 1880, 1881, 1882. That's a long time ago. The windows were 6/6 sash. There were some larger ones, but that's pretty much consistent all the way around the entire building. Hello, what did I do wrong? Dave, help me. Oh no, got it. Thank God. Okay, there are 4 large doors on all 4 sides of that big winery building. This is what the door looks like when it's closed. The entire thing is closed. There's a man door. This is when the entire door is open. That faces west, this faces north. Right here is where you step into the tasting room. I know that spot. The former distillery was still on the Tehama County Assessor's Office rolls in 1870 as something that had been there in the past. That's the only photo I have of that, anything that close. The brandy barns. Stanford had a contract with the Prussian army. He would provide the Prussian army X amount of fortified, Boone's Farm comes into play here, fortified wine, because each of the men in the army, in the Prussian army, were allotted 4 ounces of grog a day, grog, which was something that they had on aboard ship, but it was also for the men in the military. Later, these brandy buildings were used by the monks to store the stones for the new church. If you're stepping out of the sipping area, you would see these brandy barns to your right, to the east side of the sipping area. After Mrs. Stanford's death in 1905, the governing board of Stanford University didn't want to be stuck with the land and having to maintain and having to have workers. So they divested themselves of the land. By 1918, the state of California had bid and won the rights to the Stanford Ranch at Durham, which resulted in the Durham land colony, which is another whole story, but it's all interrelated. At VINA, the sale of various parcels of land, with the largest portion, then some 1,000 acres, sold to Mr. and Mrs. Robeson. Mrs. Robeson took this photo of the mansion. That would have been the house that was built for Stanford, which he never lived in. But the Robesons lived there. They were there until 1950. She had passed away in 1949, and the Robeson heirs sold the land to the Pacific Soap Company or Bernard Flynn. The Flynn family sold the reduced acreage in 1955 to the abbot of Gethsemane in Kentucky, and that abbot sent a core group of priests and brothers from Gethsemane, Kentucky to VINA, California. They are the Order of Cistercians of Strict Observance, a part of the body of the Roman Catholic Church. So here we go again, another photo. And I'm not going to use your pointer stick, this works just as well. Here's your Highway 99 going to Las Balinas. Here's the railroad. Excuse me, I'm right in your way. Through the middle of the town of VINA. Here is the winery building. Here are the brandy barns, and today you would cross here and go this way. Here are the 4 buildings that were the middle management houses, and then up here at the top was the mansion. Mansion, that's just what Mrs. Robeson called it. The brothers arrived. Can you imagine what that was like in 1955, getting off the train in Sacramento? Hotter than H. Well, it's June, you know, you've been here in June. You know what Sacramento's like in June. I don't know any of these guys. I know a couple of them that are there now. They're wonderful, wonderful individuals and strongly committed. One of the things inside the office at the monastery where they do their business is they repainted one wall. One of the monks was quite artistic, and they repainted one wall. They named all of their various parcels for saints. So today, when you drive in from VINA, here's the railroad, here's VINA, you come in this way, the 4 middle management houses, the winery building, the building for the brandy barns. I have to. Right there was the old church. Just south of it, right here, is the new church. That top red building was the mansion. Today, you go this direction around here. This was a gate. The postern gate is what they called it. But now you go around St. John and St. James this way. and this way, and you come out on the north side of the winery building. This is now all planted to grapes in an east-west configuration, and this is all planted to walnuts and further west. Does that make sense? So you've seen the same image 3-4 times now. Nothing changes, that is, the buildings don't move. This is a photograph from 1981. I only included this because you see here the embrasure very well. Oh, and it's also one that predates any of my images because the water tower is there, and I don't know when that was taken down. I can't tell you. I'm sure it's somewhere in my notes, but I can't tell you right now. Probably the same time they took down the ones here in Chico? No. Here are the exits for the sluice water at the very base of the winery building. So when they needed to clean out between the large tanks, that's what they did. It's the north side of the building. These both came out of my camera. Again, same thing. And those of you who have been there recognize that area? Yes, Treva, Heather, we will go there. So this was where the homes were for the middle management. This is the former entrances right about here. This is no longer open. You see the grapes here on the west side. Those are Carmelos, very old variety, no longer planted. Very large nuts, walnuts, Carmelo walnuts. Very large, but very difficult to run through a processing because now they're all kind of consistently the same size walnuts. So these workers often had wives and families, and when the monks arrived, they renamed them Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Not Ringo. The mansion became the monks' library, and it went down to defeat in November of 1970 by fire. There were over 8,000 volumes. The library has been reconfigured. This is out of my camera from 2005's Jubilee. And I'll let you read it. A lot of what the monks have has been donated to them. It's pretty amazing. 2005 was their 50th anniversary of existence at VINA. And it was an open house, and Rick and I, my husband and I, were invited to come. So we're going to talk about the stones. This is a lot of reading for all of you, but it's just pretty much linear in what happened first, what happened second. Having the abbey secularized in 1835 meant there were no monks, no priests left there. So it fell into disrepair. It was purchased by William Randolph Hearst for his estate at Wintoon. You know where Wintoon is? Siskiyou County. That property is still owned by the Hearst Corporation. Anchor. Let's get a project for Anchor, Mike, for Wintoon and Siskiyou County. That would be a good one. In 1931, boatloads of stones came to San Francisco. They were stored. This is what the church looked like still in Spain when they were dismantling it and putting it aboard a couple of ships and bringing it to California. In 41, Hearst didn't have any money to really build his monastery. He gave the stones to the city of San Francisco. They were in the way. They were in the way. They were in the way. There was vandalism. There was some talk of changing the format and using those stones to build a Buddhist monastery, but a lot of Catholics said, we're not going to do that. So that didn't go forward. Sometime in 70, the Cistercian Institute became interested, but again, there's a lot of startups, but not a whole lot of see it through until much later. Margaret Burke, whom many of you might know or know of, received a grant, and she did a lot of work to try and get this accommodated and done. The stones having been lost, no one knew in what configuration they needed to be rebuilt. It was a major, major project. That's the drawing or artist rendering that Margaret Burke made. And she continued to correspond with the director of the Young Museum, the earthquake of '89. Then it was Abbot Thomas Davis, who had been in correspondence with the museum and was one of those off again, on again. In '92, it moved forward. And in '94, the first load of stones leaves San Francisco for VINA. Okay, so sidebar here. Stones are heavy. You know that. You might be able to carry one, I might be able to carry one, but you get loads and loads of stones. Well, the monks had paid $1 for the stones, but they still needed to get them up to VINA. How do you do that? Well, you talk to your fellow truck driver. You know, he's got a truck and he's got a flatbed and he can tie it down, but you have no gas to pay him. Truckers donated their time, their labor, their truck, and their fuel to get him up to VINA. I guess it's belief. I'm not trying to sound like I'm religious, but belief in something better, belief in keeping and maintaining historical integrity. Second shipment of stones, historic groundbreaking, construction, till we get to this point. So because of seismic safety, the entire church was built of cinder block. Everything was cinder block with rebar in the floor, but you want it to look pretty. So how do you do that? You have the stones. They brought in stone cutters from other countries who had abilities and knew how to fit these together. If you ever go there, you'll notice the stones are not the same color. They don't even sometimes belong together, but they had to be re-chiseled in order to fit. When you see the arches, like you have arches here, it's amazing how they ever built it back in the day and then transported here and rebuilt. That's what it looks like. Isn't that amazing? Really cool though. So, you know, you want to leave your mark on the world. If you were a stone cutter in that time, you had your own personal mark. Like, ladies, those of you who sew and you put in the back, handcrafted by Susie, right? Or this quilt was made with love by Betty. And these are the kinds of things that they did then, but what they were, it was chiseled into the stone. Now, if you go to, I'll show you on a photograph, remind me to talk to you about where the chisel marks are, okay? That's your job, thank you. Early photos. This is the Monk's Corral area, that's the area. Oh, and the echo. I mean, you can hear the vibrato. I'm not a singer, but anyway. But then if you move outside the church, it's kind of dull. Not the same as in the Monk's Corral. If you ever get a chance, go up there when Chico State's choir sings up there. It's pretty phenomenal. That is not one of my photos. I borrowed that. But that is, you might recognize this one. This one is Paul Mark Schwann, who I first met in 1994. Paul Mark was the Abbey's point man, person that could speak to the community. I had need of some information. Then again in 2000, when I wrote the book about Stanford Ranch, Durham, he was able to provide me with some information, which, because the two were at contiguous periods of time in history, he was able to provide me with information. We became good friends. He's the son of a farmer, and I'm the daughter of a farmer, and we're both Catholic, and he's much more elevated than I am, but we had an instant rapport to the point where it's been very, very comfortable to be up there as other than a wine drinker. Look at his, well, you can call them cassocks, you can call them vestments, you can call them all kinds of things, but we'll just call them vestments for today. 2 colors. It'll come in handy when you remember that for later, just like the brandy barns in the other building. The trees were planted in 2005. I don't know, but the Chico Architectural Review Board, when they were putting in Marie calendars, might have had heartburn about that one. Does anybody remember that? Yeah. Interesting. I don't know why they're planted here, other than that they do grow in California. That is not my photograph. That is a student at Chico State who was an art student. His name is, where's his name? I wrote it down. Chris Tabay. He took that photograph. The only reason this is a little bit out of consistent or in order is this is the monk's corral. This is the center altar. The congregation sits here. Here is the organ covered with cloth to protect it while it was still all being built. You'll see another photo by Chris in a moment. Very artsy, you know, with the, I couldn't get my camera to do this. He's very artsy.
And the chisel marks? Chisel marks?
Don't know. Oh, yeah, not yet.
Not yet,
But
okay.
no, good.
I didn't know if you were going into the...
So there's something at New Clairvaux called monk. Did I miss a? No, I didn't. Called monk time. Everything that is has a place in our lives. Sometimes you have to wait a while to get to it, have it be available and usable. Walnut trees grow old and large and no longer bear a crop. Hey, Les, does that ever happen on your place?
Not yet.
No. Randy McLaughlin of Old Durham Wood, Durham, remember Durham? Came in, he took out a large number of trees, and these trees are at my brother's house. This was then, it's not now. These trees are piled at my brother's house because Feather River Wood and Glass, now called Westgate Hardwoods, has a mill there. And this is what the trees look like, and this is what they look like when they're on the saw. And this is what they become. These are slabs. They have stickers in between to keep air flowing around all sides of it so that this can be built. Monk time. The trees become something else that's usable. Monk's Corral is here under the arches. This is the congregation, and this is the front door. Remember the vestment that you saw? The two-tone color? Look at the two-tone color here, symbolizing the monks. The nails in the center are those from the cross when Jesus was crucified. Chisel marks. Another picture by Chris. The organ is in place, the monk's corral area seating is done, the congregation seating is done. When you come in and you walk by the altar and you come this direction, go into this wall, you see the chisel marks. There's a backwards 4, there's a star, there's an X, there is an L sign, like the letter L. That would have been your mark or your mark or your mark. You cut that stone and you left your mark in the stone. What they did very, very well is they congregated all of those marked stones in one area. So it's like a little small vignette, small historical area. So when you go to the right side, the south side of the church in the Monk's Corral. You're welcome to walk in there. The trees look a little better. This is the west side. Another Chris picture. This is the cauldron for Easter. The monks, you see the two-tone colors? I've been really, really lucky. Maybe because I talk a lot. Sorry. I got to know Paul Mark. He was instantly gracious, instantly accommodating. So from all the times that I had been there, and when he was invested as abbot, and then again in 2016 when the monks asked me to put together the application for the State of California Historic Registry, I was given some access that normally they don't give. Number one, I'm a civilian. I know that's an odd word, but I'm not a monk. Number two, I'm female. So they had to vote to allow me onto the grounds. All the monks had to vote to do that. Thank God I passed muster. Somebody said something good about me. Another thing that, even though they grow grapes, the monks of VINA have partnered with Sierra Nevada to do beer, or have beer. Do you remember the very first thing you saw when you saw that chronology about the stones? Ovila, Spain. what did they name their wine, their beer? Ovila beer, in honor of the Ovila Monastery in Spain. La Trappe beer comes from Koningshoeve, which is in the Netherlands. As Dave already told you, I was born there, and where Koningshoeve is like 10 miles from where I was born. So I knew that it was there. Paul Mark and the abbot of Koningshoeve were really good friends. So in 2012, when we were there for the first time together, Rick and I, we went there and had a little bit of beer with the abbot at Koningshoeve, and we've had a couple of glasses of wine with the abbot at VINA to see that there are 200 Cistercian monasteries in the world. And to now know that Bernardus is in Rome and he's head of all 200 monasteries. It's kind of cool to say, oh, I had a beer with him once. That's the old distillery building. These are the Carmelo walnuts on the west side, the grapes. A monk holding a bottle. To the left is Father Placid. To the right is Paul Mark Schwann, the abbot. And that's it. Questions? No questions, thank God. Okay. Really seriously, are there any? I've got you all flummoxed. Okay, yes, sir.
And I was wondering if Stanford's and the Bidwells got along, and Stanford's making wine, maybe Bidwell would be there.
I have no knowledge of Stanford and Bidwell being bosom chums. I have no knowledge of that. I would venture to guess that Stanford and his wife were of a financial standing that was not maybe incompatible with Bidwell. I don't know. Mike, you wrote the Bidwell book. What do you know?
Yeah, they weren't good friends. Political opponents. They could do business together.
Makes sense. Stanford, I would think, I don't want to say a bull in a china closet, but Stanford knew how to move forward. I mean, it's like, I guess I'm losing my microphone. I'm sorry. Stanford, I think, would just use whatever he could and move forward to his benefit, to answer your question. So I'm not sure that there was ever any love lost between the two. Any other questions? Miles, God, come on, you have to have a question. Janet? Margaret? Treva? Karen? Les? So I got to tell you one more thing, and then I'll let you go for the day. Thank you. My first foray into doing really strong research was at Chico State reading microfilm. God, I can't tell you how many thousands of hours I've spent reading microfilm. So there's Mike Gillis and Mike Magliari, and they come into the library at Merriam, and they see this old woman reading microfilm, and she's looking up obituaries, because that's what genealogists do. But genealogists aren't historians, or they never used to be historians. Different rule today. But Mike and Mike come in, and they see me there several nights in a row, and what are you doing? I said, I'm looking up obituaries. Well, yeah, we can see that. Why are you looking up obituaries? I said, because we got to go to court to try and save Durham Cemetery. This is 1994. Exactly right now, 30 years ago. Mike, did you know you're that old? So the thing was, at the time, Durham Cemetery had fallen into disrepair. And we had to prove to a judge that we did indeed have Sam Smith and Susie Jones buried there. How do you do that? You can't see their headstones because it was overgrown. But you can on paper. So my job was to try and find them. Judge Bill Patrick, who was my civics teacher when I was a Durham High School senior, was the first judge to hear our case. Later it was adjudicated by Judge Ann Rutherford, and we won. But at the time, it was finding the obituaries. Bill Patrick said to me, can you find any records about this? I said, well, there are mistakes in obituaries, but the fact that Joe Jones died yesterday, he's going to be buried tomorrow at XYZ Cemetery, are rarely in dispute because it's the way you invite your friends and neighbors to come to the service. I remember talking to Mike and Mike about it later and saying, guess what? All those obituaries came into a good spot because we won in court, we won before the Planning Commission, we won before the Board of Supervisors, and we got $10,000. So anyway, so obits are worth your time. Les, go ahead.
Oh, I've got a question. I heard they're having a hard time staffing the monastery because of the lifestyle that they're required to live when they're there?
Yes. People don't join religious orders the way we did back in the day, when each Catholic family had 4, 6, 10 children. Somebody got the farm, somebody married the town constable, somebody married the man who ran the hardware store, and somebody became a priest. That's not true anymore. So no, they're having difficult times with that, to the point where they have lay people working there. In fact, a priest just died. I went to his funeral a couple of weeks ago, and it was lay people who helped nurse him in his last days, because they have their own small area where they don't leave the land. They stay there. Do anybody want to know how they're buried? Does it sound weird? You wouldn't know. Okay. So they're buried essentially in a shroud, which is very, very finely woven burlap, bleached white, white, white. But it's much thicker than the vestments that they're wearing here, which is a more linen feel. They are on a plank board with ropes below it that are rolled up. Their face is exposed, and they're laying like this with a rosary in their hands. The body is wheeled in. It's at the church. You have the service, they have the mass, they have the blessings, and you all walk to the grave space together. The younger monks take the job of lowering the remains. Prior to the lowering of the remains, the face is covered by handkerchief-sized shroud material, same as what he's wearing. The rosary is removed from his hands, and he's lowered in place. There is no casket, there is no embalming. It's called green burials today. It's something that's becoming much more acceptable. We do them at Durham Cemetery, not in Durham, sorry. And it's done very, very quietly, very reverently, very peacefully. People who are invited to come, and I knew him from years ago, are invited to put dirt on the grave. And some do, some don't. But it's very what we know today. I worked for the Bruzy family. I have great esteem for them as a family and for their businesses. I know Newton Bracewell folks, salt of the earth people. But we've become so into, let's charge you more for the casket, let's charge you more for this, let's charge you more for that. It's not necessary. State of California health and safety codes don't require it. So you can do that, just so you know. And there's nothing wrong with cremation. Just put a stone somewhere so we knew that you existed, you know. We deserve to know that you existed. The men who did so much, I want to say men, the women too. Annie had a place, Mrs. Stanford had a place, but we always look at the men. The men who did the railroads, the men who built the farms, the men who had the hardware stores. They're the ones that we look to today and say, oh, wow, we do that. We still have those people. You're here. All of you are here. You are the hardware store. You are the people that keep the records. Yay for obituary lookers. Anything else?
Is the Durham Cemetery full?
No. There are people in this room that have space there. And they're still above the green. They're on the green side of the grass, yeah. No, it's not full. Go ahead.
Can you talk a little bit about the star, like you say, people are cremated and scattered, that there's a way to...
Oh, it's called a cenotaph. It's a Greek word. It means the body's not here, but we remember this person here. So you decide to be cremated, and you want your cremains scattered at sea or over Lake, what's the lake?
Almanor.
Thank you, Almanor Lake. Or even over Reno, if that's what your thing is, you know, whatever. There's a way to remember you. The marker on the wall says, we remember Joe Jones or Susie Smith, birth, death dates, you know, what they did. The cenotaph is many ways. Okay, there is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. High School, or there is John F. Kennedy Boulevard, or Washington Memorial, or what's the street by Costco?
Martin Luther King.
Thank you, Martin Luther King Drive. Those are all cenotaphs. They're not there. They're not on the road. They're not in that building. They're not in that school. Those are all cenotaphs. So John F. Kennedy could have 15 different cenotaphs, but he's only buried at Arlington. So that's what it is. It's a way to remember them. I have no problem with scattering or placed elsewhere, but if you made a difference in the town of Chico, by golly, we should have you. We can't build another Bidwell mansion, but we could put a plaque on the wall. All right, I'm done talking. Thank you very much.
Oh,